Hi, everybody. Welcome to the food tour with Chef Tom. We are really excited to make one of our camper favorites today. You all know if it were the opening day of camp, this is what we would be eating. And there is the one, the only, Chef Tom.
Hi, guys. Hope everybody's doing well this week. And so we're going to start this class. There's a lot to do in this short class, so we're going to kind of do this quickly, and hopefully everybody will be able to learn what they need to out of this.
If you have questions at any point, you can unmute yourself if you're on Zoom with us and just ask them. You can throw it in the chat, and if you're on Facebook or Instagram, we'll also try to answer your questions too.
All right, so there's a whole bunch of different things going on in this thing, so we're going to be doing one right after another and overlapping a lot of things as we do it. One of the things we're going to start off making the ricotta for today, and also the paneer for Wednesday's meal, which is going to be the matar paneer, which is the Indian peas and cheese. So to that end, we're going to need to take milk, which I have right here. We're going to take a gallon of milk and put it into this pot, bring it to a boil, and add an acid, which will help coagulate the proteins. We'll strain it, drain it, and we'll go from there. A small trick that I learned in one of the few cooking classes I ever took was in a cheese making class, where they recommended if you're boiling milk to add a couple ice cubes, 1, 2, quite literally a couple ice cubes, and just swirl it around on the bottom of the pot. So you kind of coat the entire bottom of the pot with just the tiniest little bit of water. Somehow or another, and I'm not entirely sure of why, but it does seem to work. It keeps the milk from burning, okay? That only works, though, if you don't scrape the bottom of the pot. So I'm putting this in. The ice cubes are not all melted. They're sitting there. It won't really make a difference to anything what we're doing. It'll just add a tiny little bit of water to it. Not a problem. So we're putting all this milk in. We're very lucky here in the Pioneer Valley where I live. There's a couple producers that make their own milk here in the valley. So that's one of them. So I'm going to take this, put it on the pot, and just turn it on while we begin the other part of our meals. The next thing that I'm going to do while that's coming to a boil is I'm going to turn the oven on to 400 degrees so we can roast our vegetables. When I'm doing that, I'm also going to turn the water on for the pasta as well. So a lot of things going on all at the same time. So I will put my oven I happen to have a convection oven, so I like to put it on convection roast because it works well and it makes it very quick to roast the vegetables. And I'm turning it up to 400 degrees. I'm going to turn my overhead fan on. Let me know if it's too much noise, but I'm trying to pull out some of the heat from the kitchen while I do this too. So if it gets to be too loud, please let me know and I'll turn it off.
So some people are, I think, looking ahead in the recipe right now, and we got the question of, is there a substitute for citric acid?
Yes. Well, guess what? I don't have citric acid at home either. So essentially, there's 3 different kinds of cheeses that you can make that are very similar to what we're doing now. It's ricotta, paneer, and there's a Mexican queso blanco, which is just a white cheese. All of them are basically identical. Essentially, you take milk, you boil it, you add an acid. The acid tends to vary a little bit depending on which one you're making, but the truth of the matter is it doesn't make that much of a difference, and most people would not tell the difference between them. Usually for ricotta, I use citric acid, which is a powder that I buy. I keep a bunch around, particularly at camp. I don't have it at home because I don't usually make ricotta at home, truthfully. But for paneer, I usually use lemon juice, and for the queso blanco, I use a white vinegar. For today's purposes, I'm going to use white vinegar for both cheeses. I'm going to make the ricotta and the paneer using white vinegar. Okay, so we'll get to that. We're going to just keep this boiling at the moment, and we'll go from there.
Can you use dairy-free milk?
I have no idea. Honestly, I've never tried to make a paneer or a ricotta with a dairy-free milk. I don't know that it's going to work the same. In fact, I know it won't work the same because you don't have the same proteins to coagulate. So you may get some coagulation, but I have no idea what ultimately that will look like. So if I was going to substitute anything for the ricotta in today's meal, I would take some tofu, crumble it up, add a little bit of salt to give it a little bit more flavor, and use that as the ricotta. And then, for instance, at the summer camp, for vegan dishes like this, I buy a grated mozzarella, vegan mozzarella, and I use that. The brand we use is Daya. It seems to be a reasonably decent brand. But if honestly, if you don't like any of that, leave it off and just basically make a paneer with roasted vegetables and sauce. And it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to really go even further than that. I'm just going to take some of this. I'm trimming off some of the less white spots off of the cauliflower right into my compost bucket. And I'm just going to take a bunch of the florets, quickly cut them up into some small pieces so that we can toss it with some olive oil, garlic, salt, and pepper, and put it into the oven and start roasting that while we're working on everything else as well. So to that end, I've got some cauliflower here. I'm just going to start cutting it up into smaller florets. Please feel free to ask questions while I'm doing this. I can talk and cut at the same time. One of my few.
Yeah, excuse me, Chef Tom. We were trying to catch up here. We put the milk in the ice cubes, 1 teaspoon of citric acid, and
Not
1
yet.
teaspoon of salt.
Not
Yet.
No
Okay.
acid until it comes to a boil.
Oh, so we put it on a boil. Okay.
Yeah,
got it.
turn it on, let it come to a boil. Don't stir it. Don't do anything to it, because if you stir it, especially if you touch the bottom of the pot with the spoon, you'll find afterward, pour it off, that's the point where the milk would burn and stick to the pot. So just leave it be, let it come to boil. It'll take a little while, which is why we put it on now. As you can see with the cauliflower, I'm cutting it up into reasonably small florets like this so that it roasts reasonably quickly. Now, when I do a mixed roast vegetable like cauliflower, I'm going to do some zucchini, and I'll do some red onion in this case. If I'm going to put it all on one pan, I cut things to different sizes, so ultimately they will all roast at about the same time. So something like cauliflower, it's a denser vegetable. It will take a longer time than something like the zucchini or even the red onion, which will roast at a much quicker. So the cauliflower is going to be one of the smaller things I cut up in size, and then the zucchini will be larger chunks that I do. And really, you can use any vegetable that appeals to you. Peppers, sweet potatoes work nicely. Anything, broccoli you can do. So it's really quite flexible. I'm just going to take this, put it into a large bowl. And honestly, I don't measure out. It's an approximation. And it really is. It can be more, it can be less. It's really whatever you like in terms of vegetables and how much you would wish to put in as well. This all started at camp as a way to feed a lot of people. Figured it was a nice, easy meal to introduce everybody to. Most kids like pasta, cheese, sauce. So it was a good way to start off our days at Eden Village Camp. So in this case with the red onion, I just trimmed off the top, the bottom, cut it in half, peeled it, cut it in half again the other way, and I'm just going to cut it into large chunks. So you can see they're sizable chunks. I'm going to throw all that in with the cauliflower now. I'm going to do both halves of the onion. I happen to like a lot of onion, so it can never be too much for me personally. All right.
And now we got a question about, is the minced garlic for the roasted veggies? I know.
Yes. The minced garlic is for the roasted veggies. And again, if you don't like a lot of garlic, you can reduce it. The other thing you can do also is if you don't want to use fresh garlic, you can certainly use a little powdered garlic as well. Just be careful how much you put in. You don't want to make it overly garlic. Well, unless, of course, you like overly garlic. In which case, go for it. All right. So in this case, the zucchini, I just cut in 4 pieces, and I'm just cutting it in.
Vegetables ready. It looked like the vegetables had to be ready.
Can
Somebody sounds like they want to ask a question. Please do. So this is going into the bowl as well. And yeah, my oven is still only at about 230, so I've got a while. So this is time.
230. Could you also
Excuse
tell
me?
we only have-
Yes,
Is it possible to use a white onion instead of red onion?
absolutely. Absolutely.
And we only have half a gallon of milk. Is that okay?
Then you'll just do a half gallon. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And then you just
Thank
reduce
you.
the amount of acid you do by in half. That's all.
Thank you. Thank
Yep.
you very much.
No, my belief in cooking is don't get hung up with the exact specifics. I am more about technique than I am specific ingredients. Technique is really more important. Ingredients, you could often substitute a lot of different things for a lot of different things. Sounds a little odd, but there we go. But if you know the technique, then you can incorporate a lot of different things that way. And you have a lot more flexibility. And then these days when the grocery stores are not always carrying everything you happen to walk into, which as Americans we're not particularly used to, it's a good thing to start to learn to be a little bit more flexible, because not everything may be available at all times, and it's okay. And some of it's purely seasonal too. Some things are more available during one time of the year than the other. So I have 3 cloves of garlic here. My favorite way to chop garlic is I have a large cleaver here, and I happen to be very fond of this technique, which is loud, noisy, but a whole lot of fun. Take the garlic and very vigorously smash it. When you're done, it's mostly chopped already. So at that point, all I do is do a little bit more chopping. To mince it up a little bit more. If you have a garlic press, that certainly works as well. Personally, I'm not fond of garlic presses, mostly because I hate cleaning the things. It's a pain. All right. So at this point, we have the vegetables here. I'm going to toss it with a little bit of olive oil, some salt, some pepper, and the garlic. And then I just proceed to toss it all. If it's easier to do it by hand, do it that way. And then I'm just going to take the sheet pan that I have here and lay it all on there. Make it a single layer, more or less, like that. Okay. Sorry, it tilts and it slides. So this is going to go in the oven as soon as my oven is preheated. And I'm going to keep that. My milk is getting hot. And meanwhile, pasta water is also boiling. So at this time, we can grate mozzarella while we're waiting.
What were we supposed to preheat our oven to?
400 degrees.
Okay.
Okay. And now, you may not be able to keep up with me in terms of what I'm doing, but hopefully you'll get the general gist of it, and you'll be able to proceed without me afterwards. And I'm going to do a couple things to expedite this a little bit. From one of the last classes, the spanakopita class we had, I had some ricotta left over. So I'm going to use this ricotta to make this. And then I'm going to take the milk that I'm making and make it exclusively into paneer for Wednesday's meal. But I will show you how to do the whole procedure now, so you can do it. Okay, so this is about a half a pound of ricotta that was left over. I'm going to grab an egg, put that in there.
So this is the cooking show version this week, where Chef Tom has some magic tricks to show us how it's done. I think how long the vegetables...
Every once in a while, it's the magic of television, and this is one of those instances, yeah.
How long do your veggies cook in the oven? I think it's going to...
About 20 minutes, okay?
If we're using different vegetables, it might take a little
It might
longer.
vary a little bit, but if you're using any of the hard vegetables like cauliflower or broccoli or sweet potatoes, that tends to take about 20 minutes or so in the oven. And that, the caveat on that is it really does depend on how large you cut your vegetables. The larger they are, the longer they're going to take to cook. I also like to do them small because, especially in a dish like this, it gets a better distribution throughout the whole dish and you don't end up with some big chunks and then no vegetables personally, I like to have a bite of vegetable here, a bite there with the pasta. And
Excuse me?
Yep.
Where do you put the onions?
With the vegetables.
With the vegetables, with the roast vegetables. Okay. So I have some oregano here. I grow my own oregano and thyme and dry it and then use that. So when I ever anytime I use my own herbs, I have to do a really good job of crushing it because generally they're not crushed. So
Chef Tom,
yes.
since we are baking the vegetables again with the pasta, do we want them a little more al dente or like that?
No, not really, because honestly, what happens is once it's in the pasta, it's mostly going to be heating through. You're not really going to be cooking the vegetables much more at that point. At that point, you're really just heating everything through, making sure the cheese melts nicely. But no, the vegetables should be fully cooked. You can go back, you can, pull back a little bit in terms of your pasta, make it a little bit more al dente. That certainly works. But even that, I wouldn't go too far. If you add more sauce, well, the more sauce you add, the less you can need to cook the vegetables. I'm sorry, pasta, and because it will absorb some of the sauce as well. So what I've done in here, I'm just mixing it all right into the container since it was already half empty, is I've put an egg in there, some salt, I'm putting pepper in now, some oregano and thyme, and I'm just going to mix this up here. And then before the class started, I had taken some frozen spinach out and put it into a bowl just to let it defrost. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, as you all know, spinach has lots and lots of water. So I'm going to take basically this handful of spinach and just squeeze out the water, the excess water. If you don't have it already defrosted, which I'm guessing most people don't, I was preparing for the class, just take it out, defrost it. You can defrost it in the microwave. And you know what? If you don't have spinach, you don't have to put any in. I just like adding lots of vegetables, so that's why I do it. So I've squeezed out a lot of the water into here. So now I end up with one handful of spinach and a bowl full of water. And while I was talking, my oven came to temperature, so I'm going to put it into the oven right now. I like to put it on the lower rack so it cooks the quickest. And I will set a timer because, especially doing something like this, it's easy to lose track of time and forget exactly what was up. And that's never a good thing. It's nice not to burn the vegetables. So once I have the spinach here, I'm going to take it and just to give it another quick chop. Again, more just so that it just has a better distribution throughout. I'm going to put this back in the bowl. I emptied the liquid from there. I'm going to put the spinach that I mixed in. I'm going to add the ricotta to the spinach that I mixed before, and then just mix that up. We're going to use this to put into kind of in the middle layer of the baked pasta that we're making.
So, Chef Tom, if our home cooks are following along and they're making their own ricotta, they are probably not doing this step right now.
Yeah, this step is, I'm jumping the gun. You're absolutely right. And in part because when you finish making the ricotta is going to be fairly warm at that point. You've just boiled the liquid. You're having it sit for a while, but it's still going to be rather warm. Mixing a raw egg into hot ricotta, you're going to wind up cooking the ricotta. So usually, for instance, at the summer camp, when we do this, we're always making the ricotta the day before. It just makes it easier. Given the limited time on a class like this, it's a little tricky to try and do everything at the same time so that everybody can witness it all. So
Excuse me, how much ricotta do we need?
Only about a half pound for this amount that I'm doing. Okay, so this was one of these small containers of ricotta, and I used about half of it. Okay, one egg, herbs, garlic. The thyme, the oregano, salt, pepper, and then mix in this. Okay.
So for those folks who have their milk that's now boiling, what should they do next?
Okay, so my milk is still coming to a boil here, so I'm still waiting for that. However, in the meantime, my water did come to a boil. So I'm going to start cooking my pasta. All right, because for the sake of efficiency. Now, I do know that as a chef, I'm capable of doing, multitasking very well and doing several things at the same time. That also happens to come after 40 years or so of experience. So if these are too many things to do at the same time, just do one step at a time. It's fine.
Wait, when the milk starts boiling, are we supposed to add the citric acid then?
Okay, so when the milk starts boiling, add yours. If you have the citric acid, use that. If not, per quart of milk, it is 2 tablespoons of acid, or 2 tablespoons of either lemon juice or vinegar. So for a full gallon, it's going to be a half a cup of vinegar. If your milk has come to a boil, take your acid, whatever you're using, be it the vinegar or lemon juice. If you have citric acid, great, and you mix it with water. You will turn off your milk, and as you're turning off the milk, you're pouring in your acid, give it a gentle stir, and then stop. And then let it sit.
Do we mix the citric acid with the cup of water?
Yeah, if you're using the citric acid, mix it with the water to help dissolve the citric acid.
And then do we also add salt or no?
Yeah, you'll add a little bit of salt at the same time, and you can dissolve that in the citric acid as well. Does that make sense?
So the heat is turned off. We
Yep.
add the citric acid and the salt to the water, and then we add that to the milk.
Correct. Exactly. It's a lot easier to do than to describe sometimes. All right, so I've distracted myself with all of this. So I've got boiling water here. I'm going to add some salt to it just because I like to cook my pasta with some salt water. And now I've got, in this case, the original recipe that I have in the cookbook says says bow ties. I have penne. You can use whatever shaped pasta you really like. It's not that critical by any stretch. I'm cooking about a half a pot of it, or a half a pound of it, I should say. Sorry. And I'm going to give that a stir. And we're going to let that go while we do something else, which in this case, I'm still waiting for my milk to come to a boil. So I may be a little behind some of you people. If that's the case, hopefully I described the ricotta. Now, once you've added the acid into the milk, it needs to sit for about 10 minutes to let the curds curdle, essentially. Okay, so let me do one thing. Just switch my burners so maybe I can get one to go a little quicker.
After we add the water citric acid mix to the milk, do we stir it up and then let it sit for 10 minutes?
Exactly. Just give it a gentle stir just to make sure that all that citric acid is kind of distributed throughout the milk. And then literally just let it sit for about 10 minutes. And you should start to see curds forming almost right away, actually. I mean, once you put in the stuff, you should start to see it start to separate into curds and whey. All right.
My milk is starting to do the very small bubbles, but not boiling. Should I wait?
Give it a little bit more time. Let it come to a full boil.
Okay.
Yeah, it works better. In fact, sometimes too, and it's happened to me that, and I have yet to figure out exactly why. Sorry, I can't give you that. I will put the acid in and it hasn't curdled as much as I'd like. In which case, sometimes I will turn it back on for a few moments, bring it back up to a boil, and sometimes that'll aid in the curdling process.
In the DIY cheese class you guys put out, it said not to boil, but just do the little bubbles. So maybe it's slightly different depending on what you need to do.
Honestly, I don't know how what the camp has chosen to do is DIY. This is always how I've done it in the kitchen. So I can't speak to their methodology. This is just how I've always done it.
So we were making a farmer's cheese there, which is a little more rustic.
And that may be it. So if they're doing a slightly different cheese, they may want to not bring it to a full boil and just do the pasteurization process where basically you're bringing it to about 185 and killing whatever bacteria may be there.
Well, it's good to know that you can make something no matter what degree it is of boil or.
You can. You know, things are a lot more flexible than that you might like to think. I had milk that I was going to make into yogurt, and it was actually already slightly sour milk. I put it into a pot, walked away, sort of forgot about it, came back, it had come to a full boil, and while I had done that, it had curdled. And I looked at it and I went, well, this is not going to make good yogurt, which it didn't. However, I looked at the curds, I tasted them. They tasted fine, slightly sour. I strained it. I ended up making it into paneer, and I used it for paneer, and it worked beautifully. That's all I can tell you. So my milk is getting very close here. My pasta is boiling away here.
What happens after you put the vinegar in?
Excuse me?
What happens after you put the vinegar in?
Just stir it around and let it sit, and you should start to see curds forming.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so I've got my vinegar here. So once it's boiled, I will put that in.
So Chef Tom, does it ever happen at camp that something turns out a little differently than you expected and you have to find a new use for it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, half the job, one of the things I learned early on is, at least in my mind, a good chef knows how to fix their mistakes. Because you know what? Mistakes always going to happen. Now, if you go into a real high-end restaurant, you're paying $500 for a meal. No, you don't expect any mistakes. And chefs there, they will throw away and start things from scratch. That's why I don't like working in those high-end restaurants. There's a part of me that just cringes when chefs do that. I understand why it happens, but it's not my style. So yeah, I've screwed up. I've screwed up every which way, and 90% of what I've learned by messing it up the first time around, figuring out what I did wrong, and improving it the next time. I'm a big believer in learning from your mistakes, honestly. That's how I think we learn best in general. Failure is a much better teacher than success. So
true for everything, not just
Oh
cooking.
yeah, no, it's true for everything, not just cooking. That's like a life philosophy there, for whatever it may be worth. All right. All right, so pasta's cooking away. My milk is boiling. I have my ricotta, the mozzarella grated over here. And I have some tomato sauce. Now, yes, at the camp, we make our own marinara from scratch. We do that on a regular basis. I don't do that at home. Let's be perfectly honest. I don't do everything at home. It would be lovely, but it's just not real. So, I try and, when I do cooking classes, I try and mix it up so that there's the parts that if you really want to go crazy and you want to go to that extreme, it's wonderful. And yes, it's really nice. And then there's also sometimes the practicality of just going to the grocery store and buying things. One of my motivating factors, honestly, at making paneer at camp is you can buy kosher ricotta cheese, but I have yet to see kosher paneer sold anywhere. So that kind of forced my hand. If I wanted to do paneer at camp, I had to make it. So there we go. Sometimes necessity is the mother of intention. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, any other questions? I'm just keeping a half eye on my pasta over here. My milk is it's close. It's not quite there. I don't want to put.
Cook the pasta so that we can bake it after, or?
Yeah, but not too much. I mean, just al dente. You don't want to crunch because it won't absorb that much. But a little bit more al dente is not necessarily a bad idea.
And how high should the oven be for baking?
I usually bake things like this at 350, 375, somewhere in between there. Honestly, for a lot of things like this, I'm not that particular. 375 is usually my go-to temperature for a lot of things. So since I'm kind of waiting in between, I'm going to again jump the gun and start a little bit on the salad here. I bought some kale here. This is the Calo Verde. It's a dinosaur kale. Personally, it's my favorite kale. It's what I like, especially if I'm going to eat it raw. This is the kind of kale I prefer. That said, any kale works for this salad. It's just a matter of personal preference, okay? I'm going to fill a salad spinner with water because I'd like to wash this because you never know how clean or dirty. So I'm just going to strip the leaves and have the stem left over. You can see how I strip the leaves. leave the stems alone. Some people like to make things with the stems. I'm not that. In this case, that's not my thing. Kale itself, I like kale, maybe not to the degree that it's become the thing in America these days. When I started cooking, kale was nothing but a garnish on most plates. It was almost never did any chef that I knew use kale unless they happened to be of Italian origin and it was specific to their cuisine. But as a general thing, you did not see kale on the menu.
So could you use a different green for this salad?
I'm sorry, excuse me?
Could you use different greens for this salad if you wanted?
It works a little differently because of the massaging technique. So if you're not using kale and you're using a lighter green, like salad, just like lettuce or anything like that, then you don't want to massage the dressing into the greens. The reason you do it with kale is you want to break down the kale to a degree. You want to have it sort of soften up a little bit and lose some of that crunch. So the acid from lemon juice does that, and the olive oil and the actual physical massaging, you're breaking down some of the cells. So we've just got this going here. So just spinning the kale. So that, at this point, I've got that there. And I'm just going to do a quick chop on that while we're doing this, while I'm still waiting for everything else. This is the difficulty of doing things like this. You are at the mercy of the time things take. All right. So whenever I do greens and chop greens, I kind of line up the whole pile into one nice, neat little pile. All the little pieces as well and whatever. And then kind of roll it almost like into a cigar type thing, like this. And I find it's easier to chop that way. So at that point, just giving things a chop, about a 1/2 inch chop is what I'm doing, but really whatever you want works. And then I'm just giving it one cut across just to cut it into slightly smaller pieces. And I'm putting it into a bowl. In this case, honestly, I'm using the same bowl that I did the roasted vegetables in. There's olive oil in there, salt and pepper, a little garlic. None of that will harm the kale that we're going to be mixing in there. My milk is very close to a boil at this point. And my pasta, I'm about to try it. I think it's close as well. I probably should have set a timer for that too, but I didn't. And so this pasta is a little underdone still. And the way I can tell is if you cut open pasta, there's still a little bit of white in the middle, which means it's al dente. I'm going to give it a few more seconds. It's really close.
Can you show us that a little closer? You just ate that piece.
Okay, my milk just came to a boil and it's about to boil over. So in order to stop that, I'm going to mix and put in my vinegar. I don't know if you saw the milk in the background. It almost came out of the pot. And of course, everything always happens all at once. So now I'm draining my pasta. So this is what I say. Sometimes it's not necessarily a good idea to try and do as much as I do at the same time.
Well, although you have the advantage of all this cooking experience, some of our families, I see, have the advantage of many hands in the kitchen. So everyone can help out with a different task.
I drained the pasta, and now I'm actually cooling it off because I'm not going to be using it right away, and I don't want to keep it cooking, okay? Now, if you happen to have everything all ready, your sauce, your cheese, everything ready, you can just take it and use it straight hot. But since it's going to be a few minutes, I'm cooling it off so that it doesn't keep cooking and get softer and softer because it's not something you want to do. All right? All right. So my pasta's there. My milk is curdling at the present. While that's happening, I'm going to, slight interruption. Since I have the oven on already and I'm going to be using a little pumpkin seeds for the salad, I'm going to toss it in on another pan right now and just toast it for the salad, okay? So if you're using it, it's not a bad idea. That way you don't have to keep your oven on too long, especially on days like today. That's just in the oven. That should stay about 5 minutes. Hopefully I won't lose track and burn it. That said, I've burnt seeds and nuts numerous times, unfortunately. All right, so now I've got a strainer here. I'm going to set up in, actually I'm going to do it into a pot so that I save the whey. Okay. And I'm going to cut a piece of cheesecloth that will fit into there. Now, here's where I hopefully you guys won't get lost. I am going to take this and make this into the paneer. If you want to just use the ricotta, just take it and use it right away. Sometimes you need to actually take a little bit of the whey and add it back into the cheese, into the ricotta to make it a little creamier, because sometimes it can come out a little dry. For the paneer.
Sorry, what is that? Excuse me, what are you cutting right now?
I'm cutting cheesecloth.
And if you don't have cheesecloth,
if you don't have cheesecloth, use the finest strainer you have that will fit the milk, the cheese at that point. Because you're trying to drain off as much of the liquid as you can, especially for the paneer, so that it sits overnight and forms a solid block, which you can then cube. Okay. All right, so I've got a pot here. I have a strainer in here. I've got cheesecloth that I'm lining inside there. And I'm just about to check my milk and see if how well it's curdled up till now. So I'm just going to put this here. And it has not been 10 minutes, so I'm fully aware of that. But in this case, it's done a beautiful job of curdling now. What I'm going to try and do, I'm going to tilt the camera so you guys can see what I'm about to do. You won't see me for a minute, but gets a little tricky here, sorry. Okay, so what I've got here, and hopefully you can see without me spilling. I don't know if that's working, probably not.
can you show us a spoonful of it?
Yeah, so what I have, these are the curds, okay? So you can see they're nice and solid. Now I'm gonna grab a ladle and show you the whey that's left behind and show you how clear it is. So the whey, in this case, is, it basically looks like, dirty water, kind of milky water, but fairly clear, it should not be, there should not be a lot of solids floating around. So mine milk curdled beautifully, so I'm just going to keep scooping it out. You might have heard in the background a beep. That was my timer for my veggies. Since I opened it up to check for the seed, put the seeds in, I did notice it takes a little, it's going to need a little bit more time, so I'm just going to leave it sit there. And this has actually come out, this is one of the nicer batches, I have to say, that I've made in a long time. It all curdled beautifully, and I'm just scooping out the curds very easily, which is lovely. And then, so basically what you have here, this is ricotta. Right here, if you just take this, mix it, use it, you have ricotta cheese. Once I take it, press it, and put a weight on it, at that point, it will turn into paneer, because all this cheese will knit together and basically just form a solid block.
Is your cheesecloth only one layer, or is it folded?
It's a two-layer, I have a double-layer cheesecloth. So at this point, now, all I have is just is lots of whey, and it is a lot. That's the thing with cheese making. You don't end up with a whole lot of cheese, and you do end up with a whole lot of whey. Good for stocks, good for a lot of different things. So I do not throw it away. So you can easily look that up and see what's going on. Now, at this point, you could take out, if you're doing this as the way the directions are, you could take out half of it, let it cool, mix it with your egg, your herbs, the spinach, and use that. And then you could take the remainder of it and just, we'll make it into paneer. So the way I'm going to do that is I have this cheesecloth here, and I'm probably going to need, this is where it gets a little tricky to do it at home, perfectly honestly, because what I'm doing is I'm folding the cheesecloth over it, and I'm going to leave it in this setup right here, the strainer inside the pot. And then honestly, now I have to hope that I have enough room in my refrigerator to put the whole thing in and to put a weight on. This is where I get.
Does the cheese need to be warm or room temperature?
I'm sorry.
I think that this is a question about using that as ricotta.
Yeah, you need to let the ricotta cheese cool down some now, because now it is very hot. If you add your milk now, all you will end up doing is curdling the egg. Okay, I'm sorry, I think I said it milk. Yes, if you add your egg now to the warm ricotta, it won't work. So give it some time, let it cool down, and then add it in. You could put it in the refrigerator, let it cool down. If you've let it cool down and it starts to get real dense, which it often will, that's when I say you could take your ricotta cheese, take some of your leftover whey that you have, mix it in until you get a nice consistency for the ricotta cheese itself. Okay?
Now, what if someone's milk has not boiled, but they see a film forming on the top?
That will happen. Milk often
waiting
does.
For it to boil?
Just wait for it to boil. You'll know it when it boils, because milk starts to rise up in the pot really fast. And that's why I say turn it off quickly and then add your acid and stir it, because it'll overflow a pot really fast. It's not fun to clean up. Been there, done that. I'd rather not do it again if I can avoid it. But that said, I probably will at some point in the future. It's inevitable.
Okay,
right.
Chef Tom, we're missing your face a little bit if you want to raise the camera back up.
How much ricotta are we using for this recipe?
About a half pound. So it's about a cup's worth.
Okay.
Let's see. Did you get my face? Well, you got my mouth. All right.
And just to go over again for the paneer, you have the strainer with the cheesecloth on the top over a bowl, and then you're going to put a weight on that. Or no, you put a bowl on top of the cheesecloth on top that goes on top of the bowl.
Something to press it down is what you're looking for. So, and it's an improvisational situation in anybody's kitchen. It depends on what equipment you have and stuff. So in this case, I'm just trying to find something that'll cover most of it. So I'm trying to figure out which was my flatter bell pot here. So I'm putting this on there. And then I'm going to take a can of tomato and put it on top of there like that. Put it in the fridge. By tomorrow, it will have knitted together quite nicely, and it should form a block. How square or round or whatever, well, that's a different story. But that's where, if you have like a tofu making setup where they have those lovely square wooden boxes with little holes in the bottom and a weight and a wood thing that goes on top, those are great, but they're kind of specific, and most of us don't have that around. So at this point, this is the paneer, and this we're going to put away and use it on Wednesday. I'm going to just put it aside for now. You will see that there will be overnight or over the next day or two, a lot more whey will come out of there, and it will become denser and denser. Okay? I'm going to go check my roasted vegetables and my, and there we go. That's like I said, that's what happens when you talk too much.
Sorry. Excuse me.
You're,
we missed what you just said. We didn't understand. Can you say it again, please?
I'm sorry. What
For
part?
layering the cheese?
Excuse, one more time.
For the layering of the cheese, can you please repeat what you just said? It was hard to understand what you said.
Oh, okay. So for the paneer, you're just at this point trying to press it, and you're trying to press out as much of the whey and liquid as you can to form a nice dense block.
What's the paneer?
Is the paneer the ricotta
Paneer,
or
okay.
been
So
boiling?
what we did is we are essentially making two types of cheese here from the mill. Okay, there's the ricotta cheese and the paneer. The ricotta is a soft cheese, which is what we're using today. The paneer, and we will fry that and add that to Wednesday's Indian peas and cheese dish, the matar paneer. Does that make more sense? Anybody?
I think there you go. We're saving our paneer for Wednesday.
Yeah. So at this point, we have roasted vegetables.
What is the ricotta? I'm sorry. What do we have as the ricotta?
The ricotta is for today's pasta bake. It's just one of the layers of the cheese that we're putting in.
So if you want to pull out the cheese, if you've just made cheese, take out some of it to use now for your ricotta and your baked pasta, and then leave some of it to press for Wednesday for our paneer.
So the one that we don't press for a long time is just ricotta.
Yes.
You don't press the ricotta at all. You don't want to press the ricotta because you want that to be a loose cheese.
How do you press it? How do you press the cheese again? If you don't have a cheesecloth?
You wrap it in cheesecloth. If
you have no cheesecloth?
If you don't have cheesecloth, take whatever the finest strainer you have, okay? Put it in there. The other thing you can do is if you have like a kitchen towel that's a loose weave kitchen towel, that will also work really well, like a muslin towel. But if you don't, just put it in the strainer, put a plate or something on top of it, and then put a weight on top of that, and that should work on pressing out a lot of the excess liquid that you're trying to get rid of.
So the ricotta is just what you scoop out.
Correct. What you're scooping out from the milk is curds. What you do with it at that point kind of determines what it is. So some of it you're using as ricotta cheese, and it should be creamy, and some of it you're using as a fry for the paneer, and that you want to be really dense. Is this curd?
Now that's kind of the exciting thing about making cheese is once you know that process, you can do a lot of different things with it.
So at this point, we have our pasta. Putting it into a bowl, large bowl. We have our roasted veggies here, okay, which are still hot, but I'm going to add it into there now. Everything into the bowl. Set aside. Now we're going to put in about 1.5 cups of marinara. I say about because if you like it saucier, put in more. If you don't like it as saucy, put a little bit less in. I happen to have a jar a little bit left over in one, so I'm starting with that. I love doing the cooking classes, but I hate wasting food no matter what. So, yeah. So I'm just scraping out this container. Going to put it in. Okay. And that looks about right. Like I said, you can add more, you can add less. I don't really measure out the sauce. It's really to taste at that point, okay? And as saucy as you like it. So at this point, I have pasta, sauce, roast vegetables, okay? So for me, put a little bit more sauce in, but not much, a couple tablespoons more. All right, now we have our baking pan right here. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to add about half of this. Sorry, I do it so that I'm not blocking the whole thing. So about half of it. Put it, kind of spread it around the bottom. Okay. And I'm going to take this is the ricotta spinach mix that we made earlier. Okay, like I said, if you just made the ricotta, you're going to want to do this in a few minutes. And now I just kind of dollop in here, spread it around so that there's some all over the place. Doesn't have to be pretty. Nobody's going to see that. So yeah, I mean, you can spread it as a layer if you want to. You know,
some people are thinking about what to do with all of this leftover whey, and I know you suggested putting it in soup. Can it be frozen?
Yes.
Is it good for saving for later?
Yeah, you can freeze it for later. Since I have lots of stock and stuff like at home, so the last thing I need is anything more necessarily. But I also have fruit trees, and supposedly they're great on fruit trees. So that's what I'm going to use my whey here for. You know, I mean, it's a big. We actually had a. This sounds very strange, but we've had a crisis in terms of how much whey in this country we have, and we actually have too much that we've learned can deal with. The huge spike in Greek yogurt has made how much whey we have in this country gotten out of hand. Because the way you make Greek yogurt is essentially you just make yogurt and then you drain it, and what you get out of it is whey. That's it. Companies have gotten very smart, and they now do whey protein. And so basically that's just reduced down whey to you. Basically all you're doing is getting all the protein out of it. So while I was talking, I just took the other portion of the pasta, veg, and sauce, put it on top of the layer of ricotta. And now I've got some grated mozzarella here that I did while we were waiting for other things. And I'm just going to top it off. When I'm ready to bake it, which is probably not yet, it's a little early for dinner in my house, I will set the oven to 375, let it preheat, and then pop this in the oven and cook it for about a half hour. If it's gotten very cold in the meantime, i.e. if you put it in the fridge and you take it out of the fridge and put it into the oven, I would say give it an extra 15 minutes. But this is still fairly warm, so this should not take too long. And so this is what you have. You put it in the oven, and it should be golden brown on top when you pull it out.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you just kind of quickly go back through?
Not
what was my- So, okay, our pasta's done.
Yeah.
We have our spinach. How much ricotta? All the ricotta?
About a half a pound of ricotta worth.
Half a pound.
So
Okay,
that's
but all
about,
whatever we're gonna use, we put it in.
that's
Yeah,
about the ricotta is about 1 cup. Okay, so I take about a cup of ricotta, 1 egg, oregano, thyme, salt and pepper, mix that all together. Take the spinach, if it's already frozen spinach, just defrost it, squeeze it out, chop it up, add that into the ricotta as well. Put that
Okay,
aside.
great.
Okay.
And then the vegetables, you just layered everything, right?
Well, I actually just mix the pasta with the vegetables and the sauce, and then I just layer. Yeah, and then I put in a layer of the pasta, layer of the ricotta, layer of the pasta veg, and then mozzarella on top.
Okay, so our sauce.
Does that make sense?
Yep, got it. Thanks.
That's the whole point. I want everybody to succeed. That's the only way.
It'll taste good no matter what order, but
Ultimately, yes. I mean, really, that's the nice thing about this dish. It's really, really hard to screw it up. Let's be perfectly honest. You have to work hard. So it's very forgiving, which is nice. All right, so we've got this. This is set aside. I'm going to quickly make this kale salad so I can show you that, and then I think we're good. All right, so for the kale salad, what I'm going to do is I've chopped it. I've washed and chopped the kale. So this is what I've got at this point. I'm going to take some lemon juice and squeeze it on top. I use a little strainer to catch all my seeds because I'm not fond of biting into them personally. And this is one of those moments when you're going to get your hands dirty. It's the only way to do it. You got to learn to play with your food. It's a good thing. All right, so for this amount of kale, I'm using about a half a lemon's worth, making sure I get all that out. I'm going to put in a little bit of olive oil, a tablespoon or so. I'm not making a large batch. It's only for 2 of us, so I don't want to have a ton left over. Pinch of salt, a little bit more maybe, and a little bit of pepper at this point. Okay. And now I'm quite literally just massaging it. I'm trying to break down the kale. I want it to get softer and more tender. And the way you do that is by breaking it up. And so that process is quite literally, that's why it's called a massage kale salad, is you want to break it up. Honestly, when I make coleslaw, I do much the same thing because I like the cabbage to do a little bit of that as well. So At this point,
Where do you put the onions and garlic?
the onion and garlic should have been with the roast vegetables.
Thank you.
No problem. It's tricky to do it. I've done lots of cooking classes, but only in person prior to this, where you can look at somebody and you can give them feedback as they're doing something and such. Doing it in Zoom is really a little trickier because obviously I have no idea who any of you are and I can't see what you're doing to be able to go, oh, do this instead. So I apologize for that, but kind of the nature of the beast these days. I actually happen to have a mango at home, so I'm going to go ahead and use a mango for this salad. This time of year, though, honestly, if I didn't have this, I might very well use a peach, because a peach would work very nicely in a salad like this as well. Nectarine, some kind of a sweet fruit, a little bit of a contrast to the slight bitterness that I think kale has. To me, kale has a slight bitterness. So when I do it, I like to balance it off with a little something sweet. And also, I'm a big proponent of textures in food. And so the kale has one texture, the mango will have another, and then the pumpkin seeds have yet a third. So you get a nice crunch, and it gives you a nice blend of salad. So at this point, I just scooped out the mango. I'm just going to dice it up into small dice. And
Now, when you were massaging your kale, how do you know when it's done?
When it feels good.
enough?
I mean, it's really a matter of feel. I mean, you can keep doing it and keep doing it. There's a certain point where I feel like it's starting to feel like it's a little bit more broken down, and that's where I'll stop. Now, the kale that I use breaks down a little easier because it is a more tender kale. So if you're using your standard green kale, it's got the tougher leaves. I would do that a little longer than I just did now to really give it a chance to break down more. But again, this is my personal taste on things too. So at this point, I've got the pumpkin seeds here toasted. I've got the kale salad with the mango. I won't put the pumpkin seeds in until the very last minute so they don't lose any of their crunch. Okay? And that's basically dinner. Does anybody have any other questions?
So you're going to, just to put this on the table, you're going to bake the pasta for 30 minutes.
Yep.
And you're going to toss those pumpkin seeds in with the kale salad, and that's it, right?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's a dinner. I mean, this time of year, you can do kale salad. You can also just do a lovely green salad too. I mean, there's lots of lettuce as well. So whatever works for you guys. But this is what we chose to do for the class, so we're doing it this way. Any other questions?
Do you think a 9x13 pan is too big?
Maybe a little bit. I know this one's closer to 8x10, so you could see that it filled it really well. 9x13 may be a little large, but that'll probably work. It'll just be a little not quite as thick. It'll be a little.
Don't need all the mango. Right?
The only thing I would say is maybe keep an eye in terms of the temperature, how long it's in the oven for. You may need a little less time just because it's a little thinner.
And did you say 375? I'm sorry, I missed that.
I honestly said 350 or 375.
Oh, okay.
So whatever, 375 is usually my standard go-to for pasta bakes like this. Okay.
Oh, yeah, found you. Hi, could you tell me, was the citric acid supposed to go in the ricotta or in the in the milk that we boiled?
Okay, the acid is for the milk that you boil. Okay, that's how you make the ricotta. Okay, so ricotta, if you've ever looked at the ingredients on ricotta, it usually says milk, citric acid. Now that I have
Okay.
it, I'll confirm that. Well, in this case, it said vinegar. So there you go.
In the
Okay.
paneer, that was something separate?
No, it's exactly the same thing. Okay, you're doing the exact same procedure for the paneer and for the ricotta. Once you've made it and you've scooped out the curds, you've got all the curds in a strainer of some sorts, hopefully cheesecloth lined, but if not, that's fine too. At which point you'll take a portion of that cheese you've just made, put it aside, and that will be your ricotta for today's meal. The rest of the curds that you have, try and put a cover on it, either more cheesecloth if you've wrapped it in cheesecloth, maybe a loose weave towel, otherwise just the strainer, in which case just put a piece of wax paper or something, and then put a plate or a bowl and a weight on top of that. And that way, when we go back to it on Wednesday, that will form a solid block cube and make into paneer. Does this make sense?
Okay, so that even though it's going to be very thin because it's being pressed, we'll be able to make it into cubes.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Yeah, it depends on how you've ended up being able to, press the whey. If it's thin piece, then you'll just cube it. For me, the way it's going to come out is I'm going to need to slice it across this way and then cube it up because it's going to be thicker this way. But if it's thin, that's fine too.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
With the paneer, tomorrow, we should cube it before the class on Wednesday, or we're going to be cubing it on Wednesday?
It'll just be part of the process.
It can just stay in the refrigerator being pressed until then.
If you want to, tomorrow, after 24 hours or so, you could take it out of the cheesecloth and wrap it up, plastic wrap, bag, whatever you want. Or honestly, it can sit there for 2 days. Mine will probably sit there until I pull it out on Wednesday. Some of that depends on how much room you have in your fridge.
And then is citric acid, can it just stay out, or does it need to stay in the refrigerator?
Citric acid, it's a powder, right?
Yeah.
The powder, it stays forever. It's just a chemical. It's nothing else. You can sit. Okay. I've actually bought the stuff that I use at summer camp. I think I bought it 4 or 5 years ago because I got a pound of it or something ridiculous. And it's still there somewhere on my shelf in my office. And when I get back there next year after a whole year off, it'll still be fine. Nothing will have happened to it in the meantime. Just keep it close so that no moisture gets into it. That's it.
And did we miss what to do with the 1 egg?
Oh, that should go into the ricotta mix with your spinach, your herbs, and your salt and pepper. And that's one of the layers of the baked pasta.
Thank you.
You got it.
I know we went a little fast.
Yeah, I'm
Chef
sorry.
Tom
I put in all these things into one little class. So it does get a little faster than perhaps I should be. And I apologize to that.
We can see the speed at which a master moves. And if you want to see any of this again, we're going to post this video on Facebook and YouTube, and you can rewatch there, see any of the steps that you want to see a little more slowly or closer. And when you have your finished dishes, when you enjoy your dinner tonight, we would love to see pictures. Feel free to send them our way.
And when I'm back on Wednesday, if you guys have any questions regarding what we do then or what we've done in the past, I'm available to answer any and all questions.
I have just 2 more questions. Could you tell me, is there a salad dressing for the salad?
The salad dressing is really just the lemon juice, the olive oil, salt, pepper. That's it. It's a very simple dressing.
Okay, and also the class on Wednesday is not 3 hours because we thought this class was 3 hours.
Oh, I don't know why anybody said it was 3-hour class. No. I'm doing it so it's about an hour class is what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to keep everything out.
Thank you very much.
Give or take. I'm sorry if you got that information. I don't know what a 3-hour class is.
That's okay.
We can't get enough of you.
That's a long class for anybody, for my attention span and anybody else.
We want next up Chef Tom Cooking School.
Chef Tom, I wanted to tell you, so I made the spanakopita last week and it was great. And then we have a new rabbi at my synagogue. He just started a few days ago and he came over for dinner last night, social distancing outside. And I made it again. So.
Oh, good.
And last night I used some of the kale I grew, which was nice.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, at the summer camp, I use any and all greens that I can get my hands on because, like I said, when we're doing it for 300, I am literally using garbage cans worth that are this big, and there's at least 2 of those. And what I will say is my mashkiach hates me when we have to do that. He's got the responsibility of checking for all the bugs, not me. That's where I stop.
Can I'm sorry. Hi, Chef Tom. How are you?
Good.
Can I ask a question? So the honey.
Oh, I'm sorry. I left that out. Yeah. So if you want a little, so I was talking about the kale salad before, the kale being a little bitter. So that's why I put the honey into the dressing. So I had left it out in my case. I'm sorry. This is what happens when you do a cooking class. So yeah, if you want to drizzle a little bit of the honey in when you're doing the lemon juice and olive oil, you can do it then. You can also use just a little sugar, or you can just make your dressing, the olive oil, the lemon juice, all in a cup. Add your honey, dissolve it, and then pour it in, and then massage the kale with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And again, a lot of, as in all cooking, it's to taste, and really, your taste determines what you put in and how much of things you put in. Don't let somebody else tell you how you should like it. Okay.
Okay, thank
Especially if
you.
you're cooking at home. You're not going to a restaurant, so you have you have control over the situation. Anything else? All right.
Okay.
Sounds
Thank
like
you
we've got them all answered.
so
for
much,
today.
Chef Tom.
Enjoy
Thank
your
you, Chef
night.
Tom.
My pleasure.
We will see you all on Wednesday at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
For our matar paneer, which I'm really excited for. That's one of my favorite dishes at camp. And in the meantime, we are going to have Angel Walk Radio tomorrow in this slot, and we hope to see you there.
Goodbye, guys.
All right. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
Bye-bye. See you Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.